Hey, everybody. Hello. So my background is all in tech startups and entrepreneurship. So I'm not sure exactly. Whoop, sorry, my challenges already. So my background's in tech startup and entrepreneurship, and I was a programmer, a developer, and I wanted to build a company. I fell into it. I was just working on a project that I thought was fun with friends, and we ended up kind of as a, let's do this fun thing. We pitched to some investors, and they said, that's a terrible idea, but we like your team, so they gave us a little bit of money. And we ended up with very little experience trying to build this serious business. And we had some marginal success. We ended up with customers like Sony and MTV, and then we were very excited, and then we went out of business. And the biggest mistake we made is we kept building stuff that people didn't want. And eventually we could convince them, or eventually we'd make it right, but that's very expensive. It takes you 6 months or 12 months to fix the problems. And by then, you've spent all your money and you have these big difficulties. You're unhappy, or your clients are unhappy, whoever. And this really annoyed me because we'd spent a ton of time doing what the books had told us to do. Everyone said, if you want to build a new product, if you want to innovate, if you want to invent, you need to go talk to your customers. So I did that, and I hated it, right? I was a developer, but I drew the short straw. And so I was the one who had to go talk to customers. And it was the worst 2 years of my life. I hated every minute of it. But I thought it was worth it, because I was like, I'm going to figure out what these guys like, and then we're going to build the right product, and we're all going to buy islands and be happy. And then we went out of business anyway, and I was pissed off. I was like, I did the work, I talked to the customers, and we still built the wrong stuff. And it turns out that the customers lie to you a ton. Everyone lies to you. And they don't necessarily do it because they're mean or they want to trick you. They do it because they actually don't know what they want. People are notoriously bad at predicting what they're going to want, what they're going to buy, what they're going to use in the future. So if you're in any sort of innovation role, this creates a real problem, because building stuff is expensive. Launching a company is expensive, in time, in money, in emotions. You sink your heart and soul into this thing. And we would love to be able to figure out whether or not people are going to buy stuff before we build it, right? That's the dream. And this is what lean startup and customer development supposedly promise. They say, hey, talk to customers, you'll know what they want, then you can build exactly the right thing. But it turns out it's really hard to do properly. And people say that you're not meant to ask your mom if your business is a good idea. Because your mom loves you, she supports you, she thinks everything you do is a good idea. And you go to her and you go like, Mom, I've got an idea for a business, it's an app. It's a cookbook app, it's on your iPad, it's got videos, it's got recipes. It sends the recipe to your phone so you have a shopping list. It's cheaper than a regular cookbook, it only costs 10 euros. What do you think? What do you think your mom says? She goes, oh, it's amazing, you're so smart, you're so innovative. Why hasn't someone done this before? So then you go off, you build it, you spend all your savings, and you launch it, and you go, I launched it, and you're looking at the sales figures, and like 0 people have bought it. So you go back to your mom, and you're like, Mom, that number should be at least 1. Why didn't you buy my app? And she goes, I don't need another cookbook. And you go, why didn't you tell me that? She goes, well, I didn't want to hurt your feelings, you seem so excited. And so we blame her. We're like, no, people should be honest to us. But that's not true. Because what happened is you asked bad questions. And when you ask bad questions, you get bad data, right? So that falls entirely on you as the entrepreneur. You run a focus group, you ask bad questions, you get bad results, right? You send out a survey, you get bad data. And then all you're doing is you're collecting more and more bad data, which makes you more confident, but it doesn't make you smarter. It's like giving an encouraging pep talk to a drunk driver. They get more confident, but they don't get better. And so you end up more confidently spending your money and making bad mistakes. So there's an easy solution, and if we have that same conversation with our mom, but instead of pitching our idea, we ask about her life, we get a very different result. So if we say, hey mom, weird question, I know, but I see there's a bunch of cookbooks on your shelf. When's the last time you bought a new one? She goes, oh, I haven't bought a cookbook in years. I know all my favorite recipes. Why would I need another cookbook? We're like, well, that disproves our idea. But maybe we push. We go, well, some of those look newer than others, right? I see some of those don't look as beat up. She goes, actually, I did buy a vegetarian cookbook about 3 months ago. Now, I was trying to eat more healthy, and I couldn't figure out how to make my veggies interesting. We go, ooh, that's interesting. She said she never buys these things, but actually for niche recipes, so we go, okay, maybe we don't need every recipe. Maybe we focus on these little clusters, Mexican food and vegetarian recipes and Atkins diet. So by just not mentioning our idea and talking about her life, we're already getting more useful information. And she doesn't know she can hurt our feelings, so she has no reason to be dishonest, right? The best thing you can do learning from customers is just don't tell them about your idea. Instead, just ask about their life. So that's kind of the foundation. And this links into some of the general thinking about tech startups. Does anyone know what kills more technology startups than anything else? Do you want to shout out a guess? Like team, bad idea, run out of money.
People that don't buy their stuff.
Yeah, people don't buy their stuff. All of these things are bad, right? But they're not fatal. Like if you start with a bad team, well, maybe you change some people, but you can get there eventually, right? If you start out with a bad idea, very common, every startup starts out with a bad idea. Unless you get incredibly lucky like Dropbox. They started with the right idea, and if you can do that, it's good. But most of us aren't that lucky. Most of us start with bad ideas, and then over time we improve them, we make them better, right? And we do that by figuring out okay, usage is 0, why is that? My analytics are terrible, everyone hates me. Why do they hate me? How can I improve this? But none of those problems kill you, you can get through them. If you're a group of university students working out of your apartment, sitting on the couch, or you're working out of coffee shops, and you launch completely the wrong product. It's a terrible idea. Everyone hates it. You've marketed it the wrong way. You've built the wrong features. That's embarrassing, but does it put you out of business? Not really, because university students, in a business sense, are immortal. They have no expenses, therefore they can't be killed. They make a mistake, they go, whoops, that was wrong, and then they try again with the lessons they've learned. And the next one's better, and the next one's better. And this is the idea of iteration. But when a big company tries this, they go, okay, we have the wrong idea, blah, blah, blah. Let's spend 10 million on advertising it. We're gonna brute force this wrong idea down people's throats. Oh, our team's so big, we need to hire managers, we need to get a fancy office. And startups make this mistake too, especially if they raise too much money. They start acting like a big company. And if you've just done a $1 million ad campaign and you launch the wrong idea, what happens to your company then? Super bad stuff, You're not just embarrassed, you're very out of business. And this is actually the root cause of most tech startup failure. There was a report on this called the Startup Genome Project a few years back. And almost every other mistake you can make when launching a product or building a company is forgivable if your expenses are still low enough. This is the beauty of being a small company, a new company. You're immortal. Your mistakes are free. It's only once you start acting like a big company that your mistakes become expensive. That's when you only get one shot. That's when your mistakes hurt. So part of learning from customers is accepting that your early attempts are probably going to be wrong, and that's okay, and it's part of the process. And if you can keep the team or the company small and cheap and thrifty, if you can work out of cafes instead of a fancy office, you're able to make these mistakes a lot more cheaply and get further. And premature scale basically means focusing on the wrong stuff at the wrong time. So when we first start a company or we're first building a product, we're trying to figure out am I even focusing on a problem people care about? Does anyone care at all about what I'm doing? Do budgets exist for this? Is there a market? Does anyone care? These are very open-ended questions that have nothing to do with your idea, and they have everything to do with your customers. And the biggest mistake people make here is they go, hey, do you care about this problem? And they go, no. And they're like, yeah, but what if it had HTML5? They start pitching features, right? They're like, I'm gonna convince you to say I'm awesome. And then people go, okay, you're annoying, you're awesome. And then they go, yes, validated. And they run off and they build a stupid idea. And then they're like, why do we go out of business? We talk to our customers. It's yeah, well, you kind of force them. It's if you go to a bar and you're annoying enough, you can always get a fake phone number. But that's not progress, right? You're giving yourself bad data. Don't do that. Then after you understand your customers pretty well, you come up with a specific product idea and you confirm that Does it have the right features? Is it at the right price point? Are people actually going to use this, or do they just think they want it? These are the more analytics questions. These are the more like salesy questions. And then after that, you're like, I understand my customers. I'm pretty sure the prototype is good for them. They want it. Then you start focusing on the growth stuff. And the mistake people make is they focus on growth too soon, because that's where your expenses really start building up. Like developing a prototype is cheap, but doing a big global ad campaign is super expensive. And the reason we jump to growth is because of our egos. Like when I tell someone I run a business, the first question they ask me every time, 100%, is how many employees do you have? And what that is, if you're just starting out, is that's pressure from everyone around you to grow faster. And if you're not ready, if you don't understand your customers yet, or they don't like the prototype yet, what everyone around you, including your loved ones, is trying to do is kill your company by increasing your expenses. So you have to have this like resistance to the social pressure that like, I have one employee and that's awesome because we're able to make our mistakes right now. And that's gonna give us the time to figure out if people really like it. And if they do like it, we're gonna build 100 million of them and scale infinitely. And then you're gonna go, well, they got lucky. You know? So like you gotta be aware, like other people try to trick you into this premature scale. So to get the foundations right, talking to customers is really helpful, but it's easy to mess up. Our goal is basically to figure out if people are gonna pay for our product before we finish building it. Now there's different ways of figuring out if people wanna pay for a product. Like if you're building something physical, you can just put it on Kickstarter. I launched a board game, I put it on Kickstarter. That's an easy solution, right? Because you haven't finished building it, you haven't done the expensive part of manufacturing, and you still get perfect information about whether or not people want to pay you. That's great. But it's not possible for every product. Like it's hard to kickstart a phone app. It's hard to kickstart a service business. And so what do we do in these problem spaces where we have a long, expensive research and development process, and we're not necessarily just able to kickstart it? How do we figure out then if the research and development's worth it? There's a couple mistakes that everyone makes, including, and in some ways especially, experienced salespeople. The first one I've already talked about, the kind of intro story. The idea is that whenever you pitch your idea, what you get in return is not data. Whenever you pitch your idea, you get opinions and you get compliments. It's obvious why compliments are useless, but opinions are a little bit trickier. Let's say you pitch your idea to someone and they go, that's stupid, it'll never work, I hate it, and I hate you by extension. You leave that meeting feeling bad, but does it matter? I would argue it does not matter, even if they are a supreme expert in the industry. In the startup world, you've got venture capitalists who invest in, and thus bet on, ideas. They are the most experienced and the most qualified in the world at predicting startup success. And their success rate is about 1 in 5. If the best in the world fails 80% of the time with their opinion that they're putting their money behind, how seriously are you gonna take anyone's opinion? All of you guys could tell me my idea is stupid, I'll walk out of here, drink a beer, not care at all. Because that's an opinion, it's not real data. But if my customers' actions show me that they're not gonna use my product, even one of them, I take that extremely seriously. For example, like a common failed startup idea is, and I'm sure someone will do it right, I'm not saying it can never work, but it historically hasn't, is a travel planning app. And the reason this is such a trap is when you talk to people, you go, isn't it annoying to plan travel? And they go, yeah, that's so annoying. And they go, nice, I'm gonna solve that. And they're like, yeah, I would love to never have to worry about that again. And then you build it and they never use it. Because what you were missing is you forgot to ask them about their life. If you go, hey, you do trips, right? And they go, yeah. And you go, isn't it annoying? They go, yeah, it sucks. And you're like, cool. Have you ever Googled for an app to make it easier? They go, nah. Like, why would I do that? And you're like, well, you just said it sucks. And they go, yeah, it sucks, but it only takes like 5 minutes. I just do it. You're like, oh, wow, right? That's scary. Like, how am I gonna get people over this behavior change? It turns out there's dozens of these apps. It's just no one goes out and uses them. And so if you want to do it successfully, you need to understand why. Like, why are they not searching for them? And if they find one, why are they not using them? So that's about your customer's behavior, not about your idea. If you start with the idea, people get very excited, and then that misleads you. And any of these questions, like do you think, do you like, would you ever, they're opinions, they're hypotheticals, they're in the future, they lead to very bad data. So a bad question is something like, do you think it's a good idea? And a good question is like, how do you currently deal with this? The first question is about your ego. It's about your pitch. The second question is about their life. To get truth, to get real data, you want to ask about your customers' lives, not about their opinions of your idea. So yeah, bad questions are compliments and opinions. Good questions are facts about their life. And this is what I call the mom test, because if you ask questions like this, even your mom can't lie to you. So good questions, pass the mom test. At a certain point, you do have to show people your product. And obviously that introduces a bunch of new biases, because I just told you, if you tell people about your product, they lie to you. So how do you deal with this? And the solution's pretty simple. If I go to you guys and I go, hey guys, I got a great idea. Thank you for all being here, listening to my pitch. Business casual flip-flops, right? Wear these to the office. They're gonna be stylish business flip-flops. You know, you live in a hot climate, you need these. And you're gonna go, wow, Rob, that's so innovative. You're such a smart guy. And I'm like, yeah, I know, thank you, thank you. And you go, I've never seen business flip-flops before. And I go, I know, I'm creating a brand new thing. It's never been done. And you go, oh, well, let me know when it launches. I'd love to see it. And I'm like, nice. And I leave there, and in my head, I'm thinking, they loved it, right? They told me I was innovative. They told me it's never been done before. That must mean it's a good idea, right? Like beds that electrocute you has never been done before, but that doesn't make it a good idea, right? There's maybe a reason it hasn't been done before. And so how do I get around this bias and like figure it out? Well, all I have to do is ask you for something you care about. If I go flip-flops, you go awesome, innovative. I go, hey, they're not ready yet. We're gonna manufacture them pretty soon. They're gonna cost 25 euros, but you can reserve as many pairs as you want for a €5 deposit. How many do you need? And you go, oh, I don't need any right now, but like, awesome product. I go, nice, thank you. And I leave, and then I ignore your feedback completely because you're not a customer. And if no one wants to give me any sort of commitments, I probably change my product. Because if people really care, they'll give you something in advance. It's not always a pre-order. And I think of these as the meetings that go nowhere. You pitch your product and you leave with nothing but a compliment. That's a problem. And it normally comes in the format, you can look out for it. It's a compliment plus a stalling tactic. So it goes, that's really innovative. Let me know when it launches. Compliment stalling tactic. Wow, that's so cool. I've never seen that before. Shoot me an email when the beta's out and I can try it. Compliment stalling tactic. What they've done is they've made you feel good and then committed nothing, right? They've ended the meeting in the most polite way possible without giving you a thing. And you leave, and the reason this is so dangerous is you believe that they're gonna buy it. So it's your job to qualify them, to figure out, are they gonna buy it, are they gonna use it, or was that just a compliment stall? So all you have to do is ask them for something. The stuff you can ask for is time, reputation, and money. So time is like a clear next meeting, or even better yet, time with their other people on their team. So let's say you're building a product for agencies who have developers, and the person who runs the agency goes, it's amazing, I love it. I actually had this meeting, and I was like, okay, she says she loves it, but how do I know if she's serious? My product isn't ready to ask for money, so I'll ask for time. So I said, hey, we're not ready yet, but can I come in next week and sit down with your development team? It'll take about 4 hours, but we'll be able to go through all the product specs and make sure this really solves your problem. And suddenly the whole dynamic of the meeting changed, and she goes, wait, hold on. And she starts seriously thinking, because this was the first time in the meeting I'd actually asked her for something she cares about. She's not gonna give me her developer's time lightly, right? She's only gonna give me that if she really wants what I'm selling. And after like a minute, the super long pause, she goes, actually, this is really important to us. When can you come in? And at that point, I take her feedback so seriously because she's given me something of value, so I know she's a potential customer. She might not buy it, but she's definitely like serious, right? Oh, and the natural flow at first, when you're early in the product development, you can only get away with like asking for time. And then as it's a bit more mature, you can ask for reputation, which is usually introductions to people's like bosses, lawyers, whoever, someone they don't want to give you an introduction to. And if they do, you know that they care. Other types of reputation, public case study, public testimonial, that sort of stuff. And money is the normal, letter of intent, deposit, pre-order. And as you develop the product to make it better, you're just asking for stuff to try to figure out if you're on the right track. And over time, that turns into money, and you're like, whoa, I just made my first sale. And that was kind of how I did the journey from being a developer to a salesperson. I wasn't trying to sell stuff. I was trying to figure out if people cared. The only way to figure out if they care is to ask them for something they care about. And soon I'm like, good news, guys. He gave me 20 grand. I guess he's pretty serious. And then I was like, wait, he gave me 20 grand. I'm a sales guy. And then I went and cried. So if people sounds like a great idea, you always get this stuff at the end of your pitch. Just push one level through and ask them for something afterwards. And suddenly, hey, I love it. Would you be willing to try it out for a couple weeks and be in a public case study? Sign a letter of intent. It tells you who's serious, and you're not trying to be pushy. Again, it's like the fake number in the bar. If you're pushy, you can get a fake number, but that's not useful. All you're trying to do is figure out how serious are they? You're trying to qualify, not convince. Because you want to make sure you're talking to the right people, because during product development, time is a very precious resource, especially when you're a small team. So you want to spend it on the customers who are serious. And that's related to the final point, the final mistake, which is just wasting time. Learning what a customer cares about does not take an hour, but meetings are only scheduled in hour-long blocks. Let's say you were building a product for agencies, and you meet someone at this event, and you go, oh, you run an agency, I would love to have a meeting with you. You exchange business cards, and you do the calendar dance, and you commute to go see them. Next thing you know, you spent 6 hours on this meeting. Why didn't you just ask them what they cared about now over a coffee or a beer? It takes 5 minutes to understand what a customer cares about. The whole meeting thing is just a bunch of overhead and formality that you don't really need. All this stuff, focus groups, surveys, blah, 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 it's stupid because it's formality that gets in the way of what you're actually trying to do, which is learn how does my customer make decisions and what do they care about. So good interviews to me, it's talking to a friend. If you were building a product about dating, I bet you would go out and be like, so on a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you like online dating? That is not useful. Imagine you were talking to a friend like that. On a scale of 1 to 5, why do you think you get dumped so often? That's not how friends talk to each other, right? And the point of a friendship is understanding another human being. And that's the point of product development also, or it's not a point, but it's a prerequisite. If you're building buying a present for your best friend, it's easy because you know what your best friend cares about. You go, oh, they would find this spatula hilarious. If you're buying a gift for a stranger, it's really difficult because you don't know how they think and you don't know what they care about. So you go, I don't know, I'll get them a gift card. When you don't understand your customers, you end up doing the gift card version of product design. It's everyone will kind of like it, but that's not enough to make something great. So yeah, I like to plan out the 3 big things I'm trying to learn from customers at any time, because you'd be surprised how often you bump into them. And you're just oh, let me ask you a question. How do you guys think of channel partnerships? And then they just tell you, because the less formal the context, the more honest people are. If I meet you in a sales meeting and I ask you about your budgets, I guarantee you're going to lie to me, because you're wait, Rob's trying to trick me. He's trying to learn my budget so he can take it. But if I meet you here over a beer and I ask you about your budget, you're going to tell me, because we're yeah, this industry's hard. Let's talk about it. That's how friends talk. You want to do this stuff at the same time as your product development. Sometimes people go, I want to be super rigorous. I read about lean startups, so I'm going to spend 3 months doing nothing but talking to customers. I can guarantee that's a waste of your time, because you can only learn so much before you have the beginnings of a product. So you want to talk to people. That informs what you build. As soon as you've got something to show them, that lets you ask more questions. And you run these 2 processes at the same time. So it's not meant to slow you down. It's meant to speed you up. My kind of closing thought is that everyone thinks that when you're building stuff or starting a company, that the most important thing is money. I need investment, I need banks, blah, blah, blah. But that's not true, because you do the important stuff when the team's still small and cheap. That's where you lay the foundations of the company. And the most important thing during this period is good co-founders, good people to work with, and your own time and attention. And too often we let people fritter away our time and attention, and you've really got to protect it, right? It's this razor focus. Because if you get just one thing right, you've built a company that scales. Dropbox only got one thing right, but it's very right, and now they have an awesome business. So all this stuff is you got to be super paranoid about the distractions and cut those things out of your life so that you can zoom in on one. And co-founders is you probably already have them, but if you don't, and you want to start a company someday, find them at your job, Find an excuse to work on a weekend project with them. If you're in university, find them in your classmates, and you nurture these relationships over years. People too often start a company with the first co-founder they meet, but that would be crazy. That would be marrying the first person you date. I'm not saying that can never work, but it's like statistically unlikely. And with marriage, you date lots of people and you only marry a few of them. But like with co-founders, we tend to marry the first person we meet. So I'd just say you want to shop around a bit with co-founders, like work on hobby projects with lots of different people, figure out who you like to work with, and it makes it a lot easier to get a cool company going. So thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Hello?
Very authoritative.
Hello? Okay, so for a software company looking to serve other businesses, how long would you spend iterating with a market segment from your experience? Looking for empirical data,
So it takes about like a week to kind of understand what customers care about, assuming you're able to go talk to them. Like if you're trying to talk to the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, obviously it takes a long time to set up those meetings if you don't already know them. But if it's customers you can reach, it's like a week, This isn't a huge period of time, and you're like, okay, I kind of understand what they're thinking, what they care about. And you do this mostly with one-on-one conversations. People try to scale it with like focus groups and all of that, but whenever you bring people together, they start trying to impress each other, and you get so many more lies, and it's really hard to get through to what they actually care about. So it's just one-on-one conversations. They're quick. You scatter them through your week, and you're like, okay, I think I get it. And you start hearing the same stuff over and over. And if you're hearing lots of different things, it's usually a sign that you're talking to several different customer segments, but you haven't successfully split them apart. So you're like, wait, there's like different groups of people who care about different stuff, and that makes the data you're getting very confusing. And so you talk to a few, and you're like, oh, these are 2 or 3 or 5 different groups of people. Which one do we want to understand first? And it's pretty quick. And then in terms of like iterating the product, you keep doing it forever. It's not a phase you go through. It's something, companies like Dropbox and Airbnb, they're still refining. What changes is that the refinements get a bit more analytical, where in the early stages of the company, they're much more heart-driven, because you talk to customers and you understand what they care about, but they're not telling you what to build. They can't do that. If they knew what to build, they would just do it for themselves. They can tell you their problems, but you have to take a guess at what the visionary solution could be. And so then you try it and you go, how about this? I understand your problems. Does this solve them? And if they pay you, then yes. And you go, okay. And then so it's less about time periods and more about milestones. So like 5 people paying you and happily using your product is like, okay, this is a milestone. Maybe we should start focusing on like, how do we scale a marketing team or a sales team or anything like that? But some companies take 5 years to do it or never get there. Others get really lucky and all of their first guesses are correct. And then you get real mad at them.
And we're out of time for questions. And we're out of time for questions. So, you guys, Rob will be outside. We just try to talk with him, catch him outside, and he's always open to do some customer development.
Cool. Thanks a lot, guys.